Okay. Welcome, everyone. We'll start with refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create, listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha
in order to
benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So can you is it screen share or make me so that I can screen share? I don't know how that's done. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Janet.
I'm still Janet, am I?
Yes.
How do I do it? I go, should know by now. Oh, I'm the co-host anyway, so I'll be who I am. Thank you. So again, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure for me to be asked to do this, and I thank the Shantideva Center again for asking me. We don't have that much time, and I'd like, therefore, to go straight into talking again about what we've talked about for these last two sessions, namely, perhaps I'll put this up so we'll know what we're talking about. Let me just wait a moment, screen share it. Can you see that?
No.
Is it possible to see that?
We cannot see anything.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not that good at it. Let me go up here. Recording.
Can you see it?
Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Good. There we go. Yes. Let me just, I'll just, again, what we're talking about is how compassion balances nihilism. This word nihilism that I use is a strong word, but as I said last week or the week before, I really want it to be something which is of help to me. And when I really push it to a limit like that, it is helpful. The book that we're looking at is the Prajnaparamita, and how the teaching of the Prajnaparamita, the ultimate truth, I'm characterizing as a kind of nihilism. Obviously, it's a shunyata, it's emptiness. But I'm saying, as my old guru used to say, don't be afraid of going too far. You'll never hurt anything in the world. Whatever's there is there. And so mentally, for me, and I think perhaps that's what I want to stress today, is the mental aspect or the psychological aspect that one should also be keeping one's mind on here. Not just looking there for an ultimate truth or looking for a meaning, but even as one's doing it, keeping in mind one's own mental state at that time, one's psychology. So the statement that we are looking at is here. Here, Sharadvatiputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects should persevere in the perfection of wisdom. And last week, what we saw was that there's a commentary, an important commentary, which said that this encapsulates the many, many volumes of perfection of wisdom, the very, very many, 20 volumes probably in total. It encapsulates what they're saying. So it's here, Sharadvatiputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects should persevere in the perfection of wisdom. Now, we then talked last week about the meaning of the mother or the perfection of wisdom, who's understood as three kinds of knowledge or three kinds of people with knowledge, and tried to get a feeling for how they originate from the perfection of wisdom. Let's leave that at that. And today I want to go on then to look at another important comment and try to go back to our initial statement. We're going to be looking at this again. Here, Sharadvatiputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects should persevere in the perfection of wisdom. And so this is one of the most famous works or lines from a work by Dignaga explaining what, when it says one should persevere at the perfection of wisdom, just what prajna paramita or perfection of wisdom is. So it's, as it says, prajna paramita jnanam madvayam sa tathagata. That's the main thing. The rest, let's leave it for today. So the perfection of wisdom is non-dual knowledge. It or she, better, it or she is the Tathagata. Yeah, and sadhya, and it is what has to be accomplished, as it says, persevere at the perfection of wisdom. So what is it again? It's non-dual knowledge. And it's being called the Tathagata. And again, keeping in mind the theme, if you will, of this series of talks, which is how compassion balances nihilism. Keeping that in mind, what I want to do today is try to understand what this means in terms of the original statement that Bodhisattva great beings, we can say it's us, you know, in other words, people who are having a go at it, Bodhisattva great beings should persevere in the perfection of wisdom. We say, great, what is it? What are we supposed to persevere in? And we have to remember who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects, because as we spoke about on the first day, that's the compassion aspect being taught there. That's why this line is said to encapsulate the entirety of the teaching in the 20 volumes. The 12 volumes of the 100,000, but putting them all together, there's 20 volumes. So keeping, again, who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects, we're just going to look for a moment at the perfection of wisdom that we should be persevering at. So it's non-dual knowledge, right? It's non-dual knowledge. Now, here probably we're all aware of a kind of this sort of language. In the Buddhism that's not specifically Mahāyāna, they have a realization that can take them to nirvana. And what's that realization? They understand as they look into themselves that there's a projection of themselves which is not there in reality. And the reality is all of the different dharmas or aggregates, constituents that make the person up. And seeing all of the diverse aspects, all the diverse constituents that make, say, me up, if I'm looking at myself, I see them and I see myself properly. And that's an absence of the projected soul or self. So it's called a selflessness of persons. Probably we're pretty familiar with that language. And then say, well, what's the thing about the Mahāyāna? Oh, it goes beyond that to the emptiness of the dharmas. And you just leave the word dharma there. And say, okay. So we have to understand here, when we're talking about prajna paramita, jnanam advayam, that the perfection of wisdom is non-dual knowledge. We have to have an understanding of what the dharmas are. So again, just touch base to the extent that one has the familiarity with it, with the basic Buddhism, the foundational Buddhism, that as we look inward, there we are, we find ourselves as we look inward. I mean, we're presented with ourselves, if you will, and keeping that focus, you think, there's a projection going on there of something that's not there. And in order to remove the projection, which is the basis of coming to pieces, utter confusion, overwhelming, greed, flying into a rage, and so on and so forth, in order to remove that projection of who I am, as one keeps the focus, inward focus, what one looks at is, these are my eyes. These are the sights that the eyes see. And this is a consciousness which comes with that. These are the ears, my ears. Those are the sounds. And this is a consciousness of hearing, which comes with that. And similarly with the nose, the tongue, the whole body, and also what I like to call it, the thinking mind, because you have to identify it. And so you have these are called the dharmas. Okay, that's why in this original statement here, where it says, here Sharadvatiputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all phenomena. Phenomena is a translation of dharma. Either you leave it in the original and you kind of think you know what it means, or you don't, or you translate it and you don't get the full scope of it. But that's now what I was just talking about. When you're looking at those, what? You're looking at one's ears. Looking, I don't mean you go outside and think of your ear, the things on your head. You're looking from inside, thinking of, you can hear, therefore you understand about the complexity of the ear as much as you know it. You know that there are sounds out there and you have the awareness. Those are three of the dharmas, three of the phenomena, which when you talk about the emptiness of phenomena as being a Mahāyāna understanding, which is not there for the people who are just looking at the more basic Buddhist text, that's what you're talking about. So I just sort of, they're a bit small here, Well, there have to be. So in the books that we're talking about here, if you remember again, persevere in the perfection of wisdom if you want to awaken to all the dharmas, all the phenomena. By the phenomena, I mean all the baddies and all the goodies. All the baddies, they're called afflicted, samklishta. They are our ears, our eyes, the sounds that we hear, the consciousness of them. And not just that, I put them here. So the 5 aggregates, 18 constituents. Is this too small to read, or can you read it? I'm not very good at this. Can you still, so I'll just leave it then, if you don't mind. Is it too small? Okay, hold on a sec. I'll just see if I can make it bigger. That could be difficult. No, it's beyond me. So I'll just have to read them to you. I'm sorry. So we're talking about the afflicted. Why are we talking about them? Because in the perfection of wisdom, as I've explained, you just have all of the basic Buddhism, all of the terms of basic Buddhism. You don't throw it out, but you say of all of it that it's not finally, ultimately true. Not ultimately true in the sense of it's the same as everything else. It's empty of any inherent existence. And what are they? They're the 5 aggregates. These elements or constituents that we look at if we are doing basic Buddhism. So what we want to try to get to here is, in a meditational, let's put it that way, in a practical way, in a practical sense, what it means to persevere at the perfection of wisdom, when the perfection of wisdom is non-dual knowledge. How do you do that? So what we're talking about here, and I'm drawing on the knowledge that you'll have from your study and meditation on Buddhist topics. This is not just an overview from the beginning where the people who are listening are totally being introduced to it. I'm not speaking in that way. I'm speaking in the way that you have some familiarity with looking inside yourself in this meditational way, and you contact yourself, if you will. There I am. And then as you do that, and don't lose focus with it, I mean, if you lose the focus, then there's no meditation. Obviously, you have to keep that focus. Then you begin to think, okay, there's a projection going on there, projected in there. It's not like you can see what's being projected, but you do know that your behavior is not perfect. You can even, say something bad, God forbid, physically do something horrible. And certainly one can get very upset, one can get overly jealous, one can get overly irritated. All of these things have to be explained. And so they're being explained here by a projection within that, not losing again that focus. You're looking inside all the time, looking inside in that meditational way, right? It's not a wandering off here, but it's not a Cartesian thing where you're looking out there at the universe. No. You're just simply here as people would have been over the last 2,000 years, confronting themselves, wondering why there's problems for themselves and others, thinking, well, it's got to be because somehow, I'm projecting something here that's not here. And then how is the projection of what is not there dealt with? It's by seeing what is there. And what is there is, my eyes, I see, and there are things that I see. And then there's this consciousness. I hear. I've got this whole neural thing, that's how we'd call it now, right? Of, the inner ear with the anvil and the what's called the stirrup or whatever it's called, all of the things in the inner ear. One doesn't need to know all of these particular words for describing that so-called indriya, that ear faculty, but that's there, right? So these are the dharmas. These are the phenomena. These are the categories which the oldest, fundamental, most precious Buddhist texts convey. And when you keep going into all of them, this is just the beginning of the two categories, the afflicted and the purification. The afflicted, me here, not where I yet want to be personally, never mind for the sake of others. That's called afflicted. Now, at the same time, I'm meditating here, I'm doing what I'm doing. So that's the purification dharmas. And the one that I want to focus in on here is the purification, which is the application of mindfulness to the dharmas. So you're probably aware that there's 4 applications of mindfulness. Application of mindfulness to the body, application of mindfulness to feelings, application of mindfulness to the mind itself, and application of mindfulness to the dharmas. Well, the dharmas mean these dharmas, mean these things that we're talking about right now. So this is not, at this point, what we might say, the Prajnaparamita meditation, where it says persevere at the Prajnaparamita, because this is basic Buddhism. So the application of mindfulness to the body is kind of what we were just doing. You look at one's body from the inside and you say, these are my eyes, these are my ears, this is my nose, this is my tongue, this is my whole skin or my whole body. And then, because body doesn't quite mean body, sukha or rupa, then, these are the sounds, these are the sights, these are the odors, and so on and so forth. That is, while focused on oneself in that inner way, not losing track of it, that's what's called mindfulness of your body. And even if somebody hits you, then they're not really hitting you, right? They're hitting your body, so you're not going to be so upset, even in that very simple way. As I said at the beginning, we want to try to keep our mind on the psychology of things here today, not just looking at what it is, but also the psychology, because as we saw here in Dignagasai, it is non-dual knowledge. The perfection of wisdom is non-dual knowledge. So how do you get to that understanding so you can understand what it means to be persevering at the perfection of wisdom if you want to fully awaken to all the dharmas? So the dharmas, if we just switch back to that word, because one has a feeling now, we're thinking that all of the dharmas, when you put that there, there's 6 perfections, they're the 18 distinguished attributes of the Buddhas, the 4 fearlessnesses, the 4 special knowledges, all of the 8 kinds of meditative attainments, the 9 kinds of meditative absorptions, all of the emptinesses, the knowledges of all those emptinesses, all those of the purification dharmas, all right? Those are the things that you'll find taught in the basic Buddhist scriptures. That's also why you can call them the dharma in that sense. They are all the dharmas, but there we are. Whether you think of them as the teaching or you think of them as the actual elements which are being taught. So again, we're going quickly, but hopefully you can stay with me. We're now then focusing on the purification dharma, or the purification phenomenon, that thing which is taught in the basic Buddhist texts, which is the application of our mindfulness. That's our mindfulness right here, in a very simple sense, it's just what we're doing as we're talking. What are we doing? We're thinking about the dharmas. That's called application of mindfulness to the dharmas. Now, it is true that one is supposed to already know them, and so your mindfulness means to bring them back to mind, having learned them. So mindfulness, or smriti here, means more like to remember, but mindfulness is fine. That's the usual translation people use, and it's fine. So we can say right here, one doesn't need to think, what am I supposed to do? You can think, this is it. You know, to the extent that one's listening to it, one is being mindful of these dharmas. We could take all of our, how can I say, our mental state together, if you will. We're all here together being mindful of the dharmas, not in some deep way. No, we're just simply being mindful of them rather than, say, being mindful of whatever else it might be. Now, what is the Prajnaparamita then saying about mindfulness of these dharmas, mindfulness of all of these things that we've been talking about, especially when we're talking about the mindfulness of both the afflicted side and the purification side, and the purifying side. Both me as I'm here, you know, listening, seeing, smelling things, tasting things, feeling things, thinking about things, where I have no awareness, I'm getting angry, or I'm getting incredibly greedy, or I'm feeling terribly upset, or whatever it is. That side, all the descriptions of that side, and when we're doing what we're doing now, which is like a purification side. We have our intellect working, we have a certain samadhi, or what do you call it, a samadhi, a certain focus, so that we're not losing track of what's going on. There's a certain clarity. Maybe it comes in and out, but we get some idea of what's going on. It starts to form some sort of understanding. That's the purification side. So all of these are dharmas. Now, here one has to, unfortunately or fortunately, think a little bit more clearly about what a dharma is. So a dharma means like an attribute. So if you say here, I am impermanent. The impermanent is an attribute of me. You're looking at something and you're attributing something to it. You're qualifying it by something. So a dharma means something that qualifies something. And then you have a dharmin, the one which has the qualification. So to jump to what I'm trying to get across, what is the attribute here that's being talked about for everything? It's the attribute of being totally empty of any kind of inherent existence. And so the odd thing is that attribute, that attribute, the ultimate, is of course weird because it gets rid of the thing, the so-called dharmin, the entity of which it is an attribute. And that leads us to the understanding of how the entity, the bhava or the dharmin, is actually non-dual with the emptiness, which is its attribute. Enough of that. Let's go back now to our mindfulness, okay? What are we mindful of? We're mindful of these different things that we're talking about here. One doesn't need to have too much worry. I'm not quite sure what they are. One has enough knowledge. This is what it means when you say mindful. You're not trying to remember. You're not trying at this point to, how can you say, take in new stuff and understand something. It's not like I need to understand this. I'm going to understand it. Then I'll have got something new that I understand, and there I am. That's not the way you come at it. Mindfulness means you're remembering something that you know. And so you allow yourself not to be a total beginner, and you go back to what you know. You give yourself a little space, and you bring it to mind. It may not be clear, but you allow, okay, one's doing it. And now at this point, one can get into what non-dual knowledge means. Because the mindfulness itself is one of the purification dharmas. And one is looking at that dharma itself as an entity which is qualified by this ultimate attribute, emptiness. So if I say it again, if I put it in the kind of language we might be more familiar with outside the specific teaching of the words in a sacred book, more into the language we might be used to if there are no books being talked about, we just talk about it. It's like, this would be called the Mahamudra. You're looking at the nature of your mind. You're seeing that the nature of your mind is, how can I say, unfindable. You just allow it to calm, settle. And as it settles, then you begin to just simply allow it to be. And as you allow your mind to be, as it settles down, as the extraneous thoughts begin to stop, as you say, can suddenly see the breath. There's a certain quietness. And one has these experiences, these familiarities from one's meditation. This would then something be taught in these books, and you're now going to qualify it with it too has no ultimate truth. It too is not something to settle down on, not something to be fixated on. And so, in essence, what it would be then is a subject and object duality disappearing, or in a more complex way, an entity, something that's there, this state of mind, in a conventional mode, and its ultimate mode, which is absolutely not there. I'm calling it a nihilism, just totally not there. That those two are not separate entities. Those two things are not separate. As you look at one, you find the other. As you look at the other, you find the other. So that then is the best I can do with non-dual knowledge. The application of mindfulness to the dharmas, to the emptinesses of all phenomena, is what's meant by perseverance at the perfection of wisdom. The mindfulness itself is included amongst the entities. So being mindful even of that entity, mindfulness, as qualified by the attribute of not being an entity inherently, let's say, but through dependent origination, is what's meant as non-dual. That is the Tathagata, the way, it's gone to the way things are. Tathagata, it's gone there. So when one perseveres then, here Sharadvatiputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all dharmas, all phenomena, in all their aspects. And don't forget, fully awakened means Buddha, in all their aspects, should persevere in the perfection of wisdom. And the perfection of wisdom is this Tathagata. And the Tathagata is non-dual knowledge. Talking from a more meditational point of view, I'm not saying one can easily do it because one isn't familiar with it. But this is what's meant by something kind of beyond, if you will, the understanding of the selflessness of a person, which we talked about at the beginning of today. It's not just that person is projected in a way that it's not there. Not just any dharma, but even this dharma which is being called Tathagata, even the mindfulness of all of the dharmas, everything that the Buddha's taught, both the good and the bad side, that is also qualified. All of the phenomena, including that, are qualified by this emptiness, what I'm calling nihilism. And it's liberating, right? It's liberating. There's no longer anything one has to learn. There's no longer anything one has to get rid of. And so there's the Tathagata, there's the perfection of wisdom. And I don't want to go on too long because it's too much, but we'll have questions and contributions. But we have to now look at the compassion aspect. That's the nihilism aspect, as I'm calling it. That's one's meditation on emptiness, okay? That is definitely what is necessary to persevere at the perfection of wisdom, is to persevere at understanding the lack of an inherent nature in anything there. But how is it balanced? And if it doesn't need balancing, why would you need to balance it? Because they say you do need the upaya, you need the, in other words, if one's emptiness doesn't need balancing, well, keep going with your emptiness because it ain't nihilistic enough in my take on it. It has to be balanced by the upaya, by the compassion. So the compassion again is taught by who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects. All their aspects means both their ultimate and their conventional. Fully awaken to all phenomena, that's not so much different to the perfection of wisdom itself, but the wanting, which we talked about. So one's doing this meditation within wanting to fully awaken to them. And for Maitreya, as we looked here, homage to the mother, which gives rise to all of these teachings of the Buddha for all the different people. For Maitreya, this wanting here teaches the bodhicitta. How does it teach it? As we said the other day, it teaches it because it's a word for compassion. Why? Because compassion is not just feeling sorry, it's an active wish. May they be free from their suffering. And that's why he uses this strange word, want, karma. And it's always associated with this state of mind, this citta, this bodhicitta. And here, therefore, this Tathagata this, you might say, mindfulness of all of the Buddhist teachings. Which includes that mindfulness itself. Understanding them all in their ultimate aspect as just without any final nature whatsoever, never produced, never came into being at all. You know, everything that we're seeing is like, what do you mean never came into being? This is real. No, absolutely no more real than winning a lottery ticket in a dream. It's not there. You say, but of course it's there. Well, it isn't. You say, but that's absurd that we're not here. Yeah, but that's why you're calling it nihilism. So that, even the understanding of that is equally informed by that understanding. There's no place to stand, as it says in these books. That whole understanding is together with this wanting to become enlightened. And so the two together are what are called the mother, the Prajnaparamita, which is the origin of everything. It's not just a static state. As the Dalai Lama once said, I remember he said that there are no ultimates, but if there were one, it would be this, you know, this compassion, as he would put it always, you know, this bodhicitta. And even that is being understood as just one more of these phenomena, which is qualified by this ultimate, not ultimately existing. But together, they are what I'm trying to put across as a nihilism, which is being balanced by a compassion. And that is yes, it's certainly has stood the test of time in these books for a couple of thousand years at least. So people looking at it have certainly admired it, and I think it's admirable. But it's a heck of a lot, obviously, in a 45 minutes to have to listen to. So I'll think it's best at this point to, if there are particular questions about anything specific here today and in general, please. Cindy?
Thurman, in many, many, many of his talks, says that nothingness cannot exist. That he goes on to show that and I've never really understood it, his point, but it seems apropos to the nihilistic presentation. So his point is, as I understand it, that nothing can, there can be not a state of nothingness, because it would always be something through experience. Perhaps that's one of his views. I hate to, say what he's saying, but he does say it a lot.
Who is this now again?
Thurman.
Bob Thurman. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the mere experience of how do you, can you say something about that? The mere experience of nothingness?
Well, I mean, I can only speak from the explanation as I understood it when I was studying Tsongkhapa's presentation. So what Tsongkhapa says is, there's a wonderful sort of logic to it. At the time, let's call it of non-dual knowledge, Dignaga's Advayam Jnanam, non-dual knowledge, which let's say is a non-conceptual understanding of emptiness. Can you say experientially? I'm not quite sure. I mean, I've never been there personally, but, there is certainly no affect, no experience of it as we experience what's going on right now, whatever we're doing. Unless one of us here is a Buddha, I'm sure you all are, but I'm not. The only one who has the capacity to have a conventional reality in their mind at the same time as the ultimate is a Buddha, right? Even the very last stage of a bodhisattva. Still, when there's any kind of appearance of anything, it always is affected by the I'll use the word belief. I'm not sure that's the right, a belief in the inherent existence of things. It's not quite a belief, but it's the effect of that having always been the way things are. So what Tsongkhapa says there in specific answer to your question or to the problem you bring up is there's no experience at all as we could characterize experience in the non-conceptual understanding of emptiness. Nothing which is there in the sense that there is there in every other experience we're going to ever have, every other understanding that we'll have. Nothing there. So how then do you know it exists or doesn't exist? Afterwards, you say it exists. Why? Because if it didn't exist, it wouldn't make sense. But it's only afterwards that it is said, because there's nothing outside something which is designated. So you designate it that way. But it doesn't mean within it that, I mean, the way it is, so in other words, it's you cannot find it at the time, but afterwards, he says, it exists. Other schools, I believe, say, no, it neither exists nor does not exist. But Tsongkhapa says, well, yeah, you just say it exists because there's nothing. It's not like existing has some big meaning, which is, bringing ultimates with it. This is just a conventional. Don't forget, for Tsongkhapa, there's no difference between what we see in dreams and what we see here, apart from that one's not conventional, the other is. It's not that somehow we bring in here something which accesses a reality, which is absent when we're in a dream. For the dreamer, he'll say, it is a reality. So how come it's not reality? Because conventionally it's not reality. That's all. So he's going a long way. So I don't know if that answers, but yes, it's existent, but it's made existence after the event. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kate?
Yes, good question. I'm sorry, that's probably not a very clear question, but is it like you would say that we would experience the non-dual or the actuality of either side of this kind of coin of empty or not empty with the same stuff that is used to see either side, meaning that you don't have to access?
Yes, that's nicely put.
Is that a
There's no,
I wonder,
you see, the only reason that you're doing the one in between is to keep making the ones on either side less, in order that they, how could I say, that they are informing you continually in all the states that you're in, so that you are not harming yourself and others. In other words, it's a meditation, a bhavana. It's habituating to it. So, as I said, like the sky-like equipoise and the gyumatabu, the illusion-like conventional. So you're making everything more illusory by habituating, and the habituation is like a nihilism, I think. It really, I mean, I'm sure we've all had, experiences in our lifetimes in which there's a certain, oh, this is a profound one, as it were. And those are the ones, of course, which one has to be careful with. Those are the ones which are not informed by gyumatabu. They're not informed about, well, this is illusory too. It doesn't mean, therefore, conventionally there are not, skillful and unskillful modes of thought at particular times. One needs the skill, but it is as Holiness, I think all of it, you say, you have to meditate on emptiness, the emptiness of all things. And at that point, yeah, I mean, one has to make sure it's always a medicine for you. It's always something, it's not some great understanding that one has, which has somehow become so psychologically unhelpful that it is, making you unbalanced. But it has to be strong enough that it gives a detachment. It allows one to really love life with everything it has in it. At the same time, being successful in life for one's own sake and the sake of others. So it's an interesting way to put it, on both sides and in the middle. So yeah, exactly. Both sides and in the middle, and you've got to find the illusory nature of both sides, the ultimate of both sides, by continually doing the, how could you say, the meditation on emptiness, and that it's informed by the compassion. Tsongkhapa has this lovely verses. What is it? Is it the unification of calm abiding and insight, where the calm abiding now is all of the two sides that you put, and the insight is the one in the middle, and the unification of them both is what you're looking for. Anyway.
may I just one follow-up connected to your idea that, like you said, we're not going to harm ourselves. And in a sense, is that also sort of saying that no matter which of these contemplations that we're doing, we're not going to change reality. We're not going to change ourselves. We're not going to harm, because we're just, in some sense, like, you will know something, but you won't change it. You won't go anywhere, but you will learn it or something. I don't know.
There are two aspects, I think, to what you're saying. The one is in terms of what's called Tathagata, actually. Both presumably the knowledge and the content of the knowledge. The non-dual knowledge and the content of the non-dual knowledge, which, don't forget, is the ultimate attribute of everything. So there's a sense in which you're looking at everything when you're looking at that. I think that's, at least for me, in my knowledge, that's a certain faith, because I can't understand how you can be looking at the ultimate of everything, the thing that unifies everything, or the ultimate attribute of everything, and be seeing everything. But they say that's what a Buddha does, so fine. But in terms of does it affect the reality what one does? It's true, it says, whether the Buddhas have come to this world or whether the Buddhas have not come to this world, reality remains the same. That is a refrain in the perfection of wisdom literature, right? It's again and again, and that's true, like, what's there is there. It's not like we're making a big change to the fundamental reality of things. On the other hand, yeah, I mean, on the other hand, there is the Buddhist path, and I don't mean the one in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the one that was last week, in the Pali Canon there was the Buddha's talking. Those fundamental Buddhist path which is taught there, that path, if one doesn't follow that path, well, the particular benefits that one gets from that path will not be there for you. Which is dependent origination. They're not going to come out of nowhere, as I said, And if you want to take that further, whether it's true or not, it's interesting to consider that what, as they say, if you want to know what you did in your past life, look at your body. If you want to know what your future body will look like, look at your mind. You know what I mean? Whether or not these things that we do are not just, clearly helpful, at least I find helpful for me, having these Buddhist practices, or these, let's call them Buddhist practices. On a personal level, before I die, they certainly give me a certain balance that other people don't seem to have when they're facing their mortality or their sickness or their destitution or the fact that nobody likes them or whatever it is. And maybe, who knows, there's a value beyond, not just to me, but to somehow affect the whole world that we live in. You know what I mean? Somehow, it'll be a quick thing. There's no quick fix to the world, that's for sure, right? Wish there was, but it's just not there.
May I ask a question from something you said last week, please?
Sure, please.
When we were talking, you were talking about the perfection of generosity, and making the point that it's not that the Buddhas can give everyone everything they need, because otherwise, everybody would have everything they need. So I was wondering, would you please just elaborate on what does the perfection of generosity should be understood? How should it be understood?
Right. What comes immediately to my mind in response to the question is just something that I personally use in my own small attempt to practice it. And that's something which in Tibetan is called tongsem. And a tongsem is literally a throwing mind, something like that, a throwing thought. So, you see somebody on the street and, your heart breaks for them. It's freezing and you take your coat off and you give them your coat and you go home and you think, my God, that was, that was my best $800 down jacket I gave that person. So at that point, your capacity to give was not up to the giving that you did. your tongsem was not properly factored in. You're not supposed to give greater than your capacity to do so. What you're trying to do is make your capacity greater and greater and greater. So your tongsem is being developed. It's interesting because when you look at what the Sanskrit is for the tongsem, it looks to be the same word as giving. In other words, you can give your house away, right? Is that a good idea? You say, well, yeah, it is, because you should. Well, if the Buddha couldn't get rid of all of the poverty, just giving things away. So now, could you give your house away? If the appropriate thing to do was to give your house away, I'll have to think about that. You know what I mean? Get back to me tomorrow, so to speak. So then you push it. And boy, it's one of the things I know Tibetans really did admire. Was giving blood. There's a blood bank. Now they got used to it. Back when I first got there in the early 1970s, that was really considered. My God, people going down to give their blood. I mean, that really was just unbelievable because, the life, the blood, that whole sort of thing. I mean, I could give my arm, but don't ask for my blood, so to speak. So then, you see, we have a tongsem for giving our blood. But we don't have a tongsem probably for, a kidney. It's getting heavy. Eyeball. Ooh, How about your arm? They just quickly stitch that on somebody else. So developing the non-attachment, if you will, it somehow doesn't seem quite enough of a wording in English to say you're just getting rid of attachment when you're talking about perfecting the perfection of giving. It's that you really want them to have it, right? You really want the person with no arm who, if only somebody was right there or they could get their arm, they could get it stitched back on. And even if it didn't work perfectly, they'd have because if you think what it must be like when a person loses their arm. I mean, if you think of oneself, I myself have friends who, trying to decide whether to have a leg or not have a leg, so to speak, and you just imagine what we'd be going through. And then you push that further. And it's interesting. And here I'm outside of my league, so I can't pretend. And you really have to respect other people in this respect. You cannot go out there pontificating. But, children. Because that's what you see in the Bodhicharyavatara, right? Or if you look in the Jataka stories. Giving children away. And he said, what do you mean giving wife away, giving husband away, giving child away, you don't have any right to do that, right? So it is attachment, but it's also, as they call it, skillful means. The intellect goes together with it. And with that also the understanding that it's valueless, right? You're doing it as part of a program to achieve something like what the Buddha did, so you can teach people what they need in order to look after themselves. So does that sort of help? What you're dealing with is meditationally. Moving towards a perfection means I mean, you feel out of your, it's almost inappropriate to talk about. I mean, I can talk about, you give your body, it's famous, the Buddha leapt off as a bodhisattva and gave his body to the lioness and so on and so forth. That they're all easy. But when you get down to, the complexities of human societies and the complexities of the relationships and so on and so forth, it's like, what? You're just going to give another person away? Obviously not. That's not called a perfection. That's not called a tongsen. That's called a weirdo. You know what I mean? No, it's a skillful means when it's the time. Anything. And the other issue, of course, not sure it's to do with the perfection of giving, to be honest, but it seems to at least have something to do with it, is having the things that people need. And that brings up a very complex issue, which maybe I've got to be in my bonnet about it. But Edward Conser, who was in this ball game before, he had about status. He used to sort of talk about people as, all these people think they can read these books. They're not the right status. And what he meant was, if you really do have billions and billions and billions, you're the so-called universal emperor. You could do a huge amount, right? So so that's, of course, what we're doing now with giving. Say, if you're listening and you listen in order that you can teach to others, or I teach whatever I know, why? Because that, they say, will build up your merit, your good luck. You'll be getting more in the future. People will listen to you and this and that and the other. And then you're like the Dalai Lama, or like so many, well, not so many, but some of these incredible people who are both, quote unquote, religious and have a position and a capacity to be so helpful to so many. I mean, you can't help but be around the Dalai. The government's always trying to do something for you. It's just berserk. With kind of nobody like me will kind of bring me close and have a picture taken, knowing that, if it looks like you're his friend, it'll be good for you. And, you write a book, he says, can I give you an introduction or anything like that? It's something which can be helpful to others from status and that. So I think that goes along with it, making the merits to be able to then, how could I say, it's not, but mainly it's the tongsen, the perfection in the Buddha's mind. The perfection of giving is a totally complete tongsen. Given that the situation is right, when you think of some of the things that would be given, I mean, having no attachment, no projection of a reality onto them, just done for the sake of others and so forth. So that's at least the way I understand it.
Thank you. That was so helpful. I think just to work with, increasing the capacity to give, like just starting with that is helpful.
Yeah.
And was, you also mentioned that there's a Sanskrit word for tongsen.
Well, I think it is just dana.
Is it just dana? Okay.
Well, I mean, tyaga is interesting. Tyaga is, of course, renunciation.
Mhm.
In English. I always think, there's an aspect in which, never mind the charity, the generosity, more important for people like me anyway, is just throwing it away. The dumpster, really cleaning it out and just dumping it. Why? Because that, of course, is the basic Buddhism. Nothing more than an upper robe and a lower robe, and a begging bowl. That's it, you know? And so for us, sure, we want to give away. We've got all this stuff. We feel sorry for those who don't have. I have this silly thing that I say, I don't know if it's appropriate here, that the first prayer that we should be making is the prayer to be homeless. You know, it's an odd thing, because obviously so many in our society who are homeless have so many problems. But, you know, this attachment we have to all of the things around us. Attachment's a funny word, but you know, just the fact that there's all these things around us, it's not so much that you're attached to them, but you try taking them away. At that point, that's when you know, I mean, you found somebody robbed you for $5. Somebody robbed me. It's not the money. It's the fact that they robbed me, right? No, it's the money. And you know, it's that you had it and you don't have it. So basic Buddhism, without that, there's nothing. You know, there really isn't. As Tsongkhapa puts it, 3 principal paths. And the first is tyaga, right? Is getting rid of it. And that goes together. It's much more difficult in this way to, you know, be in the world, as they say, because you're making it much, much harder for yourself in this way of thinking. So I think sometimes the Tongsem is rendering tyaga, you know, throwing it away, getting rid of it. And sometimes it is just, I think, you know, forms of da to give, which come out in Tibetan as Tongsem. It depends on the context.
Thank you.
You don't mind me asking another question?
Right.
Would have to do with the dharmas, and I wondered if you took something like the a cup, Venerable Rena Corden, when she discusses emptiness, uses mugs a lot or whatever. But based upon your definition, you would call the mug, the quote unquote mug, which has the aspect that I am calling cup upon it, that would be a dharma, would it? Because the scripted aspect is my perception of what that actual object is, and therefore it's not separate from its own aspect. It doesn't, and from its own side doesn't have, does that make sense?
Makes sense. I'm speaking here over these few days in a very narrow sense, which I think is helpful, which is to say, I'm looking at a particular old book and taking the perspective, as I understand it, of the, I'm going to say, writers of that book. I mean, we say it's the Buddha, but it doesn't really matter. Of whoever wrote that book, the perspective of that author, and who that book was written for. So we're talking about a book which, you know, certainly is 1,300 years old. Probably in its essence, you can go back 2 millennia, 2,000 years. This is the so-called Prajnaparamita, right? Now, as I've said, my understanding is the persons to whom this book is being directed are Buddhists. It's not making fun of them. it is using what they know, talking about what they believe, if you will. And it is not attacking, it is saying that it's all empty. It applies the ultimate dharma to each of them. Each of them lacks any inherent existence. So that means that the dharmas in the book that I've been talking about are the dharmas like the 5 skandhas. What are the 5 skandhas? It's your eye. If you take the first of those skandhas, those aggregates, it's your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, the sounds, the sights, and you put them all together. Those are the dharmas. Now, is that the only way you're allowed to understand it? No. You can extrapolate, and you often wonder, since, the earlier Buddhist teaching is being understood as not having any inherent existence, let's put it like that. Well, then, any teaching which benefits anyone, are they all equally beneficial in that way? Or is it not to be pushed that far? Should you stay like it was in the original book, where it's really just talking to Buddhists about their own, let's call it, belief? And so then you come to today, where we obviously live in a very, very different universe with a very, very different knowledge system. And you have, all of the things, all of the entities, all of the, subatomic ones, atomic ones, plus all of the different constructs which come down through our intellectual heritage and so on and so forth, down to the cup on the table, right? It seems to me, back 2,000 years ago was somebody saying, here is my upper robe, or they're probably monks and nuns or something like that back then, right? There might have been lay people, a king or something around, but most of the others, there wasn't that much teaching to them, but maybe there was, whatever. But I just take, let's say, a begging bowl. And, you put the begging bowl there and they begin to analyze the begging bowl. I'm not sure I've seen anything like that in one of those old books, right? It's always looking at yourself, because they're always, the meditators, they're not like we are in our, post-Descartes or Cartesian world, where we have everything laid before us. So then, as you apply, though, the general ideas that you find in these old books, like the one we've been talking about these last few days, to that, so then you have an interesting entity, which is the mug. And that's as much an entity as anything else, right? In that sense, it would be, oddly enough, they use the word dharma for that, right? It's one of the dharma, it's one of the things. Whereas dharma really it should be a dharmin, right? In the Buddhist way, it should be something which has an attribute, not the actual attribute, but the word is used for all the phenomena, as I was saying today, because I think in these books, they're individual. It's, mugness as a mug, and then the ultimate absence of the mug there. So then you look at that entity, and it definitely, right? It's a funny old thing. I mean, it's definitely valuable to do it for us, if not for anyone else. It definitely is just a mug, and it is an entity, the mug. And then you begin to add, is it the handle? Is it the base? And you run through that, no. And they say, okay, but all the pieces together. No, well, it can't be all the pieces together. It has to be in a particular shape. So you put all the pieces together. Is it the shape? That's, I think, the 7th of Chandrakirti's ones, right? Where you say it's the shape. And you find, no, it's unfindable. Now, that unfindability in that particular entity, the fact that it is, how do you say, it's not there because of its own entityness, or swabhava. It's not its own entity. Its being an entity is given in a dependent origination through other things. That's absolutely gives the same idea, right? But if you're looking inward, because this is a meditation system, right? I mean, I'm not saying it can't help the understanding of quarks. I know nothing about that. That's somebody else's ball game. But for me, as a part of our human heritage, it is looking inward. By which I mean to say they're meditators. They're people who weren't looking in microscopes. They were doing what we do, like this, and thinking about themselves. So as we think about ourselves rather than the mug, and then rather than the mug having thought about ourselves, we then begin to think about the one I most like is our eyes, E-Y-E eyes. Not eyes, but E-Y-E eyes. I have a friend who's a neuroscientist, and he says that nowadays it's not considered separate from the brain. It's considered a part of the brain because it is just so highly developed in the human being, that particular, using an Indian sense, that sense organ. And then, they say that, this is to myself say, it's easier to understand the ultimate truth, emptiness, than it is a sense organ. That's an old Buddhist saying, right? When you think about it, that's true. You try to understand what's going on with the complexities of your eyes, how they work. We have so much more knowledge of it now than people did before, right? And you take all that knowledge, and that's inside your head, right? That's you. I mean, that, when you're looking at yourself. And, how you have all of the photon or whatever it is, it hits the receptor, it goes through the neural pathways, and then you have the different things in your brain and so forth. All of these are what's called sense organs, right? And you're just developing knowledge of them. It seems to me that looking at those and doing the analysis rather than the mug, but they kind of, I couldn't say it is better because, as one does them, and I've been in the situation that you talked about where somebody does it beautifully in front of you. I remember, I think the Dalai Lama doing it with a pencil and things like that, and a dollar bill they particularly like, because they want to show you the absence of anything beyond the, what would you call the tokpetatsam, the designation of it, how it functions without any inherent existence. So I can't say one is better than the other, but at least in the old books, they tend to be looking inside.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So let me see, can you, well, let me say this for a moment. Thank you again for asking me to give a talk. I'm not somebody who gives a lot of talks. Before, maybe I did when I was a monk, especially when I lived in India. They would ask me to do it. And I didn't have so much thought about it. You did it. No idea if it was of any value or not. But since I've become more associated with academia, maybe, and also spent so much time in the books, I don't do it much. And so to be asked, and they asked me quite a few times, and it's a kindness to do that. So I'd like to say thank you for that. And yes, I do admire these books, this Perfection of Wisdom, and I hope conveyed something of that to you. And thanks again. And let's do the dedication prayers. And again, I spend a lot of time nowadays with people who are on the sick side, more on the sick side, they're sicker than you can be, you know what I mean? They're really quite sick. And so you feel for them, right? Who knows how we help those who are not ourselves? I mean, we can help ourselves or harm ourselves. It's our business. And you want to do it for others, but there's a sense, especially when they're sick, what can you do? Doctors can do a certain amount, but it's incredibly hard. But you want so much to be able to push it across them, but you can't, right? So I'm asking my old guru about it, and I think I told you, he said, it's like a family. If somebody in a family becomes a terrible criminal, the family didn't do it, but they get tagged with it. So in the same way, if you do something really good, and there's some good in that, then people people who are around you, they get tagged with it. And so maybe that's how he explained the benefit in asking that the good that we do is a benefit to others. So in that sense, for a moment, it's also helpful to allow those to be brought in specifically, but not only them, obviously. You want these other larger things. So with that in mind, let's do the dedications. If you put them up, I'll read them if you want. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech. May all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. Victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters. All the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Munis, Tup, precious and complete teachings, 10. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience, Sopa, that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Yeah. Got it, Shay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sparham.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. So lovely to see
Come
you.
back. Thank you again. Thank you, everybody.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Sheila.
Yeah.
Good night.
Bye.